if you would like to start the meeting. I don't know if you've resolved your audio issues.
I think I've resolved my audio issues, and you all look very good, so I must have resolved my video issues too. So call the meeting to order. Welcome to the Wednesday, June 12th, 2024 Design Review Board meeting. Public comment is by Zoom or by phone by calling 877-852-5247 or 888-788-0099 and entering meeting ID 974-6174-9412. This channel 99 and on to
Mr. Perkins?
DTN.
Mr. Perkins, your audio is coming in and out. You may have to repeat the last portion of what you were saying.
I don't know what the problem is. What part? I'm just gonna go on, and if it's not working, I'm gonna have to turn it over to Lori because I don't know what the problem is. Can you all hear me?
I can hear you right now.
Okay, I'll repeat the last paragraph. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. The Volunteer Resident Design Review Board, appointed by the mayor and confirmed by City Council, fosters excellence in Ann Arbor's built environment design and advises applicants on meeting downtown design guidelines. Or at least that's what we used to do. If you could.
Ms. Singleton, would you mind taking over the chairing of the meeting due to these issues? Mr. Perkins, we should hand it over to Lori.
I'm happy to do that. I do not have the script in hand, so I might need
we can
that
forward that over to you.
Okay.
But the next item would be to do a roll call after call to order, which I can take care of.
Great.
Jeff Perkins?
Here. Can you
Lori
hear?
Singleton?
Here.
Tamara Burns?
Here.
William Kinley?
Here.
Richard Mitchell?
Here.
Wendy Ramson?
Here.
John Kotarski?
Here.
You have a quorum. The next item, as Vice Chair, would be the approval of the agenda. So I need a mover and a seconder.
Okay, anyone move to approve the agenda? I move.
Yeah, I'll second.
Moved by Kinley and Burns. All in favor?
Before we vote on this, can you hear me?
Yes.
On the 6th of this month, Tamara and I sent comments back on these minutes and they did not get incorporated. Is there a reason that didn't happen?
We did make updates to the minutes today. Have you checked them again as of today?
I opened the link that was in the email that was sent out, and I didn't see either Tamara's comment or mine addressed.
That would depend on when you opened the link. Do you know when you had clicked on the link? Because they were updated very recently.
Just before the meeting. I mean, literally.
Okay. We can accept modifications to the minutes. Right now, we are just doing approval of it. Was the agenda approved? I heard a mover seconder, but I don't think we actually moved through that item yet.
So we're not to minutes yet. We're still on agenda. So all in favor of approving the agenda? Raise your hand. Okay, that's a majority approved. Next item, is that the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, so sounds like we have comments to modify the minutes that were submitted. And those comments were provided via email by Tamara and Jeff, correct? So can we say, once those comments are added to the minutes, we can move to approve?
I'm fine with that.
Is that procedurally acceptable?
If they were, could we have a little discussion on this? Because I thought that we had incorporated all comments. Is this comments on the summary of feedback for 621 Church?
Yes.
Or were there other comments? My understanding is that those were all incorporated. So I might need more guidance on
Do you
if you could
have,
tell me what needs to change.
do you have access to the latest file? Perhaps there was a syncing issue or something that we aren't seeing the most current. Could you share that on the call? And
yes. So what I would recommend to access the latest version is to go to a2gov.legistar.com/calendar.aspx and navigate to the design review board and find the agenda link. Although it would be the same as what was emailed to you.
Sorry, when was that emailed?
Brittany, can you come off mute and share information about when that email was sent to the board members?
Yes, I can. Second here. It was at 2:16 that the updated agenda was sent out. And then I updated the meeting minutes on the Legistar calendar probably a few minutes after that. But also I do see what they're talking about. When I use the agenda, the meeting minutes have not updated, but when I go through the Legistar calendar and actually click the link provided on the Legistar calendar, that provides the updated meeting minutes.
okay, so the link in this actual report isn't correct. In today's agenda isn't correct, but the Legistar link is correct. Is that what you're saying?
Basically, I believe so. I'm not sure 100% how the agenda gets updated in terms of the meeting minutes. That might be an error on my part, and I have to go in through the agenda and reattach the meeting minutes. So I apologize if I missed that step.
Okay, with that in mind, yes, I accept that with the incorporation of the comments made that we can vote on the minutes. Thank you for
Okay.
that.
So with the
clarification process.
incorporation of comments received on the staff's meeting minutes, anyone move to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting?
I'll move.
Okay, Mitchell and Perkins seconded. All in favor of approving the minutes as modified?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, just got my chair script, so let me open that up.
Our next item is public comment.
Okay. Do we have any general comments from the public? I'm not seeing anyone other than CTN staff having joined.
No, we do not.
Okay. Next item, regular business, status of city council resolutions and changes to the design review board. So we do have a memorandum that has been shared on behalf of the board via kind of subcommittee input. Do we want to pull that up and share that within this meeting? I don't have it at my fingertips. Does somebody have it at their
I can share the memo that's in the packet, and then we can move on to some other items. We will require Mr. Perkins' audio for this, and I will also note we are joined by Deputy City Administrator John Fournier on today's call to help answer questions and move through this discussion. But to give brief background, at your last meeting, we talked through the impact of recent city council resolutions and policy direction on the future of the design review board. There was a fair amount of discussion. Chair Perkins followed up with 2 documents. One, a letter discussing opinions of the design review board on recent on that issue. And then another was a document showing projects which may have benefited from or made notable modifications with DRB input. I shared for reference the resolutions in question, indicating that the quote unquote housing development resolution is the resolution that impacts the board most closely, and also the overall economic development report that talks high level about the direction that is influencing these follow-on actions. And then there's 2 attachments. So I'm happy to hand this over to our board members now for discussion. I can pull up any materials you'd like, or I can let you share screen directly. They're also linked in your agenda.
I guess I'd like to ask Mr. Fournier, and I don't have everybody on the screen right now, sorry. But have you read the memo, and do you have any questions on it? I guess to start with.
Thank you. And thank you for having me here today. I was pleased to get the invitation. I have read the memo, and I appreciate that you put your thoughts on paper and provided it to us.
And I guess we were all a little startled by this news, and especially Bill and Richard and myself have been involved for, I don't know, 12 years working on this, you know, on a volunteer basis, as many people do for the city, and we're happy to do that. But then to get this news and no one, not a single person talked to any of us. We're not quite sure if anyone really even understands the value we bring. And I guess was just very startled that nobody had reached out to any of us or even attended a meeting to see what we do. We did do this document with Alexis couple years into the process, and felt that it really demonstrated that we are making the design in our downtowns better. And so it's a little, I guess we just wondering why you would give that up for such a little gain.
Well, let me start by saying that, you know, the recommendation in the report is not a judgment of any of you or really of the design review board. You know, we have a lot of activity in the city that adds value, and we're really appreciative of community members who volunteer their time on our board. So I don't want this to be viewed as an indictment. However, you know, it's a 90-page report plus several hundred pages of appendices. There are a lot of ideas and recommendations discussed in the report that, we did not, necessarily do we didn't do a workshop by committee for a lot of the recommendations. What we did do was try to identify a lot of changes in our land development processes that could make the process more efficient in terms of investment of time and in terms of investment of resources. That doesn't mean that all the things that we identified to be eliminated or to be changed right now aren't adding some value, but in the whole, we have an urgent need to develop housing in the city. And we had a desire to make recommendations that would regularize our development processes. And so the DRB was identified as one of those processes that does add time to our land development in some instances in the downtown. And so what you'll find in that report is a roster of small changes that all add up to something much bigger. And I think that's a recognition of the fact that there is no silver bullet to fix what I think is an inefficient process in the city. What it is instead is a lot of small changes that add up to quite a big change at the end of the day. And so, I do think that there's familiarity with what the Design Review Board does and the role that you play. I think in a vacuum, just looking at this board, there's certainly examples where value has been added to projects in the city. I think that's undeniable. But we have to weigh that against the urgency we have to develop housing in Ann Arbor and to confront the housing crisis. And on the scale, the recommendation of staff was to move forward with making changes to how we evaluate our downtown design review guidelines.
Let me just ask you, is when you were interviewing developers and contractors and everyone except us, was there uniformity in dismay over the time that was spent going through the one-step design review process?
There's uniformity in the dismay of how long it takes our process overall. And that led us to do our own evaluation.
I can agree with that. But I also have been, as a developer, subject to some of the delays, which have taken months. One project took years till I finally threw up my hands and sold the property to the city. 4 years for affordable housing that ended up with the city adding it to a park. And none of that had to do with design review. All of it was the city processes. I will say we didn't have much time getting this report this afternoon to scan through. I did scan through as much as I could in the last 45 minutes. And I saw no indictment of the design review process. What I have heard from citizens, and I'm sure you have, is dismay, the word I used before, in the appearance of the high rises downtown. I believe that the report that was sent through, the comparative examples, showed improvement in the appearance of buildings. While I have great trust in the planning department, they don't represent the same spectrum of expertise that this board does in making considerate reviews of design elements. It takes usually one step through our process. As you know, it's a mandatory review, voluntary compliance. Most developers have taken advantage of the voluntary compliance and made some improvements. I've tried to educate everybody that I can think of about the by right element that governs everything in the downtown area. It certainly doesn't include the historic district, doesn't include anything other than the DDA district. So we're talking about basically mid and high-rise buildings downtown. I fail to see how that one step, which might add, what's everybody's guess, 3 to 4 weeks to the process. I fail to see the improvement being eliminated just for the sake of streamlining a few projects. The process in downtown, as you know, and from what I've seen in scanning that the document that was just sent, it's much more serious of all the siloing that goes on in City Hall and the various departments. Solid waste, for example, I noticed that very prominently displayed. That has taken weeks, if not months, in a lot of downtown projects. It has nothing to do with the design, but it's an elemental part of the delay that has nothing to do with the ultimate design of the buildings. What I hear most complaints about citizenry, I mentioned before, is the appearances of downtown buildings. I think what the effect has been from the professionals, and I'm the developer. I think I have a decent sense of design, but I'm not a designer. The rest are. They bring elements of discussion in that the planning department simply doesn't have the expertise and background to address. And so while it won't be any skin off my back if you eliminate it and drop this process, but I think it's unfortunate for the appearance of the downtown long term. That's all I got to say.
I would just note on top of that, that it is evident amongst the many of the petitioners that this is not a holding pattern where they submit materials, it goes in and they're waiting for this meeting to happen for the direction then to keep going. They continue their design process, often sharing with us updates that they've been working on since that submission. So the design process with the development teams and the architects continue to move. This isn't a period of stagnancy waiting for this response to happen. So other than the kind of hour of time that they're attending the meeting and the preparation of the materials, which frankly, recognizing the context of your building and developing renderings are all part of the standard design process, whether they come before us or not. There is an additional time being spent other than sharing that with us and then taking it upon themselves to integrate that feedback into the design to make the project better, which they do as they recognize the value in that feedback. So it's really minuscule in terms of the amount of time that this is causing, and the amount of value versus that minuscule amount of time really seems like a bad value engineering exercise from a process standpoint. Thank you. I think the next hand that went up was Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah. When you, John, in your comments, and we really appreciate that, and your writing, you wrote a beautiful document. I have to commend you on that. And the connection or the impetus to create more housing, and especially affordable housing in the city, is something we totally agree with. We're developers, builders, and designers, and we are construction advocates. And in our town, we're housing advocates, every one of us. We are on board with you. But framing the demise of the Design Review Board with the need for more housing, as you did, is a disconnect for me. I don't see a strong connection where by eliminating the Design Review Board, the result's going to be more housing. I don't see that connection. Could you explain that?
Well, like I said, I think our report contemplates a whole roster of small process improvements that would add up to a big change in terms of how long it takes for final site plan approval. And I think that, as you all know, being developers yourselves or adjacent to developers, time is the number one enemy in many cases to getting a project built. And so, I appreciate the comments that things like our civil engineering approval or solid waste approval, those probably represent more systematic issues in terms of the time for approval. But there are also issues around the timeliness of our site plan review. And I think the report says that through a series of small changes, we think we can accelerate site plan approval by as much as, or a minimum, I think, of 2.5 months. That's a pretty significant improvement. And like I said, that's a lot of small changes that add up. And I think that's important to contextualize here.
Were you given examples of projects specifically related to affordable housing that were held up by the design review step? Complaints by the developers that extra 3 weeks caused them great heartache?
Well, again, I think what the feedback we got was much more general, right? And part of that is that when a lot of people give us complaints about the city process, they say generally, well, it's the building department. It's the building department. It's all the processes related to building. They don't, in many instances, actually mean the building code official. They use the building department as kind of a catch-all term for all of our city processes together. And it was really left up to us to evaluate, our specific processes and identify specific improvements. But something I do want to say is that one of the major conclusions of our report is that it's incumbent upon the city to support housing development at all income levels, and that is an important strategy for stimulating affordability across the whole city. So I think there are some specific barriers that come with supporting affordable housing, but there are also a lot of specific tools that we have access to support affordable housing. But we're really focused on housing generally in the report.
John, I have a couple of comments that I wanted to make relative to the recommendation. And it starts out with, if city council doesn't want to have a design review board in the city, previous councils did. If this one does not, it's not hurting my feelings that we are being done away with. And statements have been made that there's appreciation for what this board has done and the guidelines that were put together. So it's not really personal feelings that bother me that it is being done away with. It's really more a matter of, I doubt that council has any concept whatsoever of what the design review board is actually here for and what we do. One of the council people, this was where I first heard about it, was when Lisa Dish brought it up a couple of months ago, and I was flabbergasted that it was being proposed by a council member without any inkling on our part that this was coming. So, and that's okay. If they don't want to have a design review board, that's fine. Many cities do not. I got on this design review board back in the beginning when Tamara and Bill asked me to be on it, because I don't think design review boards should exist. My biggest fear was we were going to have a design review board that was going to dictate design to the developers and the architects, and I'm dead set against that. And in practice, this board does not operate that way, and that's why I've stuck with it all of these years, and I think it has brought value to projects in the city. The next part of what my concern is that if we do get done away with, this should absolutely not be a staff function. The staff, well-intended as they are, cannot do what we do, and they should not be entrusted with it. And if the city council decides to do away with the design review board, they need to do away with the guidelines, because there's no way staff can enforce what's in those guidelines. I think that's the choice that council has to make in this case. We all want housing. I've basically had a career of doing housing in the city of Ann Arbor. Maybe not on the scale that some have, but it's been a big focus of my career. So we all want housing. It's a question of how we get it. But I think the council has a pretty simple decision to make. Either they want to regulate design or they don't. But they can't have staff doing it. If my microphone worked through all of that, then I guess you all can hear me. Lori, do you want to continue?
I think John has his hand up.
I'm sorry, Lori, did you have a question? I just wanted to, I'm kind of late to this discussion, so I want to applaud what you're doing, John, and streamlining process I think is very important, and moving the city into having a champion that for development I think is important, but I think process is I think what you're hearing right now, and I think the city dropped the ball a bit, that your needs assessment really needed to engage this group first, not after. And and I think there's an important component to your recommendations, and that is placemaking. If that's the case, I think you should have also involved the Public Art Commission. And I'm on the Public Art Commission. I wasn't asked about anything. So to not bring those sort of folks into that discussion, merely asking, what do they think about placemaking and how can it be improved and things like that. I mean, you don't have to agree. You don't even have to follow it. I mean, the same thing for the Design Review Board. And I think you did do a needs assessment and interview citizen volunteers on the DDA and the Housing Commission and things like that. So, I mean, you recognized, those folks. I don't think it's really an ego here. It's rather a surprise. I would be delighted to have another afternoon free. I mean, I'm like Jeff, like, fine, no problem at all. So if it doesn't seem like you got the process right in terms of assessing the needs, I'm kind of questioning the product now as well. In particular, the notion of a champion for development. Maybe this is just me, but I just think that a champion, in the city for development, independently not aligned with everyone else. I think everyone should be on the same page. There shouldn't be just one person, one department. I mean, it's like DEI that, diversity, inclusion, and equity. I mean, if you just have one person, but nobody else cares about it, it isn't going to happen. And I believe the same thing. So the description of it as a champion, I think that may resonate with folks. With me, it sort of is a red flag, is like, oh, now we've got a champion. The Art Commission doesn't need to care about development. It does. I think, so the city clerk needs to care about development. So the fact that this board was kind of left out of this and kind of blindsided, and I don't think the Art Commission has any idea that you're thinking of a motion for placemaking. So that makes me wonder, I don't, if you didn't get that process right, just simply asking our opinion, I would just kind of wonder whether, you got the big picture right as well. So I applaud what you're trying to do. I applaud the direction you're going in. I think the city really needs to have a department for development. But I think you can hear the feelings, on this board. And I think they do matter. All on the board are important voices, in the city as far as development goes. So I just, my 2 cents. Thank you.
Bill? Oh, I think it was Bill and then Wendy. I'm not sure if that's the other one.
I said with a clarification, I may have asked John. correct me if I'm wrong, but the last I was aware, the city of Ann Arbor wasn't considered a development-ready community, that classification. Is that correct?
That is actually not correct. We are a development-ready community as designated by MEDC.
Wasn't there a roadblock for a while that to become a development-ready community, the planning commission was to be given the final say on approval as opposed to moving on to city council?
Correct. And we implemented that change about 2 years ago.
Good. So the last step is planning commission.
The last step for some site plans is planning commission. Rezonings still go to the city council. But that's required by state law.
Thank you.
Yes.
Wendy?
Sure. So I think I've been involved in the design review board longer than any of you because it was part of the Ann Arbor Discovering Downtown group of efforts to make changes. And the reason why the design review board came into being is because the community felt that the design of buildings up until that point was not up to community standards. So at the time, the discussion was, do we have a voluntary type of process or do we codify it? And we opted to go with the voluntary side of things. The city of Grand Rapids went with codification. And so we can get rid of design guidelines. We can get rid of the design review board. My sense is that the community, after seeing a couple of developments, may want that to come back. And if you end up codifying it, then yes, it's the planning commission, the planning staff that will be reviewing it like they do in Grand Rapids and some other cities. So I guess it's just a question of where it ends up, but my sense is that the community will want some element of design review in new projects in the downtown.
Nick?
I have three things I've been jotting down here. First, to expand a little bit on Jeff's comment about whether staff should apply the guidelines or not. A report is done at each of our meetings by staff. Alexis has been doing them, and Jeff before he retired, and Jill Thatcher substituted a few times, and they're all just great and terrific to work with, as is all the planning staff. What I think Jeff means by that is, as an example, at a recent review we had, there was a multi-story housing building being proposed that was sheathed in an EIFS system, which is exterior insulation finish system, which is a rigid insulation with a layer of stucco over it. And we raised concerns that exist for that material in terms of longevity and color fastness and other issues. And that's just a thing that we routinely do because we know materials and the difference between that material and a metal panel or a precast panel or masonry or stone. And we can speak to that and speak the language of the petitioner. Usually the architect is propped up to talk to us. And so it's an informed conversation, which does not mean to say Alexis and the rest of staff are uninformed. We just have a depth of that because of what we've done all the time. So we don't mean that as a dig to staff. And the second point is it seems like to me, and this is just my opinion, that there's a need to streamline the process so you can show some measurable results coming out of this streamlining process. And we are not ordinance mandated. We're a voluntary group that is more or less the low-hanging fruit and pretty easy to get rid of. And so I think I think you've probably taken the path of least resistance, and I understand that. I've been contacted by one city council member, and I did not respond. The question was, what is going on, and further, what do you folks do? And I haven't responded because I think that's for you folks to do, to keep council informed. But I would like to know if the memo we wrote in response to the news that we were on the chopping block got to council, and where that was distributed.
So are you referring to the one that was, that's in your packet today?
No, I'm referring to the one we wrote to you.
Yeah, it's the one that's in the packet today.
Oh, it's in the packet. Okay.
Right, so nothing has happened with that yet because I need, as discussed at your last meeting, I need a vote from you on the communication that you want to send to council. So I wouldn't just forward necessarily an email and put it on a council agenda as a formal communication from the board. I want to make sure that what is in the packet represents the full body here.
Understood.
And we could move to that now if you all would like. I can share screen. Has everyone had a chance to look at this letter?
Yes.
I would like to just, if no one else has comments, close with one thing that is, I think, a bit of a conclusion.
Sure.
I think what we're hearing is that you unearthed a breadth of possible remedies to a process that's problematic today and made those recommendations. I think our sense is that there is another step in the process that may have been foregone in terms of a deeper dive in kind of value versus investment, a more rigor in the investigation toward those recommendations to really ensure that you're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I think our consensus is that the baby is being thrown out with the bathwater right now because the level of value versus the cost to the system. And I know you say these are lots of incremental changes, but this is not a small value and that has been brought to the projects, and very little investment outside of the norm of, frankly, what needs to get submitted anyway. It's basically showing up on a webinar from these teams. That's the investment that they have to make in addition to what they already have to make. And in such aren't getting any of this valued, multidisciplinary, multifaceted, diverse perspectives of free input as sanctioned by a process that had a lot of community support. So it just feels very disparate in terms of the loss versus the savings in effort. And I don't know if there are other aspects of what's being discarded in this process to save time that fit that same criteria. But I wonder if there isn't a bit more research, a bit more rigor, a bit more data around some of these opportunities that are maybe in contention that could help lead to a stronger set of recommendations that make our city better.
John, one of the things that happened at the last minute in preparation of this memo that we're about to take action on to send on to City Council was that a paragraph was taken out of there. This was in a discussion between Dick and I, because it had to do with, from our perspective, and I think probably from the perspective of several other people on this board, the real problem with getting projects through the city of Ann Arbor having to do with staff functions and those kinds of holdups. And I know that you and I have been in other meetings talking about some of these issues. That paragraph came out because it just didn't seem relevant to whether the design review board should be, how the design review board should get dealt with. And I'm not proposing that it get put in now, but John, it's a real issue. And from our perspective, when we look at here's the city trying to cut time out of getting developments approved so we can get this much needed housing. But we've got these problems within City Hall. It's flabbergasting. I mean, it's frustrating to me as a builder, and several other people on this board that do development work here know what these things are. So, like I said, it got taken out of the memo because it is not pertinent to whether the design review board should exist, but it certainly is pertinent to whether or not the city wants to achieve its objective. So I'm not proposing that it go back in. I don't think it should. So, but I don't want it to get lost in this discussion. If you want to do something about getting projects approved directly, you got to do something in your own house.
If you want to send that language to me directly, I'd be happy to read it.
All right.
John, is it possible to make amendments to the resolution?
Well, the resolution has already been adopted by council. And so what I can tell you is that I will certainly be sharing this discussion and your thoughts with other city leaders. I can't promise that that'll cause a change in direction, but I can promise that your words will be very thoughtfully considered and talked about.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I make a motion that we approve the memo as drafted and ask city staff to please forward it to council.
Second.
I think we all seconded that. Might be a good thing to show. Everyone's hand shot up.
Yeah. All in favor of approving the memo included in the packet to submit?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
We will find the best way to get that to the council.
So
And
could
would you
could
like
you
to include the attachment
Yes.
as well?
sure. Could you copy us on what goes to council eventually so we know what they have, and if we get another call, as I did, I can talk more intelligently to them.
Sure. We can track which agenda this might go on and how it will be incorporated, whether it's under communications. I'm not sure exactly the line item that it would belong under on a upcoming council agenda, but we can track that. And when that is prepared, we will make sure to send you that agenda link so that you can see which meeting it's on and
Thank you.
mhm.
John, I'd like to thank you for attending this meeting. I know the resolution has been adopted, and it was a courtesy to us that you came and we held this special meeting and that you listened to what we had to say. So I just want to express my appreciation that that you've given us this further opportunity.
Sure. And I appreciate that you all called the meeting and invited me to come here. And we will consider your comments and we will be discussing them. I promise you that. Okay.
Right.
Oh, I want to make one note, and that is just to clarify that the resolution removed the requirement to go in front of the design review board. That doesn't necessarily mean it can't be highly encouraged and that we can't still continue to hold meetings should those, I don't know if anyone would take us up on it, but especially where there might be a high level of community concern, it might be a venue that helps teams get the leverage, the support they need. I don't know if there is any possibility or reality in which that is a functioning outcome of this, but I guess it could certainly be something that through the culture of the organization, they were, or teams were encouraged to submit, attend, and get that feedback for the betterment of the project and for the community. So
It could be a lot premium.
it does remain.
Well,
What's that?
It could be a lot premium.
That's true.
thank you for that.
Okay. So I think we are on to unfinished business, which has nothing on the agenda unless someone has something to raise. Communications, this I think we've covered that with our last topic. Dick, did you have something to share on one or the
Yeah, well, now that the Open Meetings Act no longer applies to us as a group of people, we should all get together. It's been a pleasure working with all of you, and it's been terrific. So
Well, you are still a
That-
board. We don't have the,
oh,
you're
we
not
can't do
formally
that?
dissolved.
Okay.
I'm just letting you know, we actually have we have 2 submissions for DRB for next month. So we will still be availing ourselves of your design expertise until there's a formal dissolution, which I don't have a timeline for that yet.
Well, when the guillotine falls, drinks at my house.
So let me get this straight. So the resolution has been adopted, but we're still a functioning board until what?
Let me clarify. The council has adopted a resolution directing us to prepare an ordinance amendment. However, the ordinance amendment has not come before council yet, and until that happens, the board still exists and functions.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification, because I think there's been a lot of confusion on our part. So, any timeline, any idea when that ordinance change is going to, just so we don't get blindsided again?
Fair. Probably before the end of the summer, but we're still working on it.
Okay.
I just have one question. So John, when this resolution you're preparing gets passed, then the design review board will cease to exist. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
But doesn't the resolution right now just say that you're not required to come before us? I mean, with
No,
this,
the
not the same thing, but it would be good to know whether we are a board or not.
Right. Perhaps Hank and I can just review the documents and provide that feedback to you in writing, so I make sure that I'm not speaking out of turn.
The intent would be that with that being approved, there would be within it an absolution of the board, a dissolution of the board, whatever the right word is for that.
Then can I ask a follow-up question, as long as we have everybody still assembled? Assuming this ordinance change will occur, and while I'm not a process person myself, I say I'm very critical of the process that's been gone so far. But assuming that the ordinance is approved and we're dissolved, are there any elements of design review anticipated as projects go through the city in the downtown area?
The design review guidelines would still exist. And so I think, as discussed by Jeff and others on this call, we would, ask developers to consult with them. Staff would provide comments back based on them, or some process would be instituted to provide comments back based on them. But the board itself would be dissolved.
But the group that would be accepting those changes or discussing those and responding to those would be members of the planning department?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I think at this point we have another opening for public comment, though I don't believe there is anyone in attendance.
There is not.
So that leaves us to adjournment. One motion to adjourn. Jeff? Any seconds? Tamara? All in favor of adjourning this session of the Ann Arbor Design Review Board?
Aye.
All in favor? All right. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll see you next month.
Yep.
Thank you.
Maybe.
Lori, thanks for stepping in for me in my